One of the most shocking things I ever heard in a sermon was the church I went to in college. Our preacher pointed to his wife in the front row and said, "There are many women I am more compatible with than my wife, and there are so many men that my wife would be more compatible with in a marriage."
What if I made up my mind to rely on you? I thought I wanted it easy, but easy never needed you. And just because I'm feeling weak and feeling lonely doesn't make it true.
He was doing a sermon series on relationships, and the whole point was that in relationships, it's never supposed to be about finding someone who is perfect for you, who's the most compatible, but it is just a choice to stay and love and listen, regardless of what happens and regardless of who they are. And that sermon is one that my friends and I have referred back to years later. It's something that has just stuck with us. And I think it's the most beautiful wisdom about relationships. So thinking about my relationship, we are the most intense people I've ever known. We are both dominant, powerful, argumentative, critical, passionate, determined. Like, I will do whatever it takes to get what I want. And I'm sure that both of us could find other people who are more peaceful and chill, less domineering, more fluid. When we first started talking last August, Trevor described our conversation style as a wrestling match. We are not chill people. We do not have a chill relationship. But I would never want to trade those fire clashing and find someone who is less passionate, less drive, less challenging and dissecting and analyzing, pushing me to change and grow and develop in all the ways that I need to for my soul to fully flourish. Trevor and I are actually extremely compatible. There is no one else I want to talk on the phone with and listen for 6, 8, 12 hours straight. Right now, we are flooded in our relationship culture with all of this advice of being compatible, all the way to being sexually compatible. People telling you you have to live together for several years to know if you're compatible as roommates. This whole attitude of choosing and compatibility has led to the highest divorce rate. I'm gonna link below this New York Times article that analyzes our ideology of marriage and how it's completely changed within the past few decades. For the first time in human history, we no longer view a huge portion of it as this stabilizing force for society, this stability and strength for raising children. We view one of the primary purposes of marriage as a self-actualizing force. A huge reason to be with the person is to help self-actualize you. Whereas before, marriage was viewed as more collective for all of society, as a stabilizing force. And Trevor and I were talking about this yesterday, and he was saying that a huge part of our purpose on earth is to have children and then get out of the way and let that generation take over. With this next part, I'm not at all encouraging people to date and get married within a year. With my relationship, so many people are like, why are you still long distance? When are you moving to Nashville? When are you getting engaged? My family, some of my friends are like pushing my relationship to be more intense than I wanted to. I'm only 24. I feel so young. I feel so content being so strong, committed, but not wanting to rush into something that I have the rest of my life to stay committed to. So that is a caveat to one of the best homilies I've ever heard. The priest was saying that marriage is not easy, but but it's really, really simple. And he gave 3 criteria. And he said, once you meet these criteria, don't burn in passion and be super physically frustrated, just get married. These are the 3 criteria. Number 1, agree on your faith. Agree or discuss how Catholicism will play out in your life. Number 2, agree on children. How are you going to educate your children? How are you going to raise your children in the church? Teach them the faith. Number 3, figure out how to address conflict in a healthy way. Make sure that you have argued, resolved what you're arguing about, been able to resolve your disagreement, figure out healthy ways to communicate. As long as you've figured out and discussed those 3 things, go get married. And this connects so well to that sermon I heard in college. You don't need to spend 5-6 years dating, living together for 2 or 3 years to figure out if you're compatible, if you can have a successful marriage. It's just about choosing to stay committed, choosing to love even if you don't feel in love. And then he said that once you get married, you can grow in love together. You can bend to each other. Another talk I heard on marriage in Trevor's RCIA is that throughout the relationship, decades of being someone, each person will change and develop, and it's almost like you'll get to love different people as your spouse changes and grows. Something else so formative, deciding whether or not to stay in a relationship, the mentality some people have when choosing to get divorced. They think about, am I happy in this relationship? Is it causing me to self-actualize? But instead, we should think about the Aristotle Aquinas definition of happiness, eudaimonia, human flourishing. Are the discussions and conflicts and experiences in the relationship loving this person even though sometimes it can be so challenging? Include times when you're really hurting each other, when you feel distressed, when it does not at all feel happy, when it doesn't seem like the other person is helping you to self-actualize. During conflict and disagreement, in times when you are unintentionally hurting the other person or they are hurting you, it is in those times when you're able to love the most, when you're able to serve, to be humble and apologize, to love like Christ. Are you being challenged and shaped? Are you understanding more how to die to yourself? Are you being stretched? Are you learning more about how to love? Another gem of wisdom from this 80-year-old woman I met on a flight. It was a year and a half ago after Thanksgiving, so it was the first time I visited Trevor and we were in person in our relationship. So I was flying back to California, and this woman sitting next to me, we were talking about our lives. She was saying how her husband just died and sharing about their love story and having children together, regrets and successes, joy within the relationship. And she told me that if within a year he was not either proposing or talking about marriage, getting serious, planning a future, then ditch him, break up. She's like, you are so young, intelligent, beautiful, you'll find someone else. And in my mind, I was thinking, no, that's crazy. It's good to date for years and years. But she was coming from a time where it wasn't all about compatibility, but about choosing to stay, raising a family together. Love was not a feeling or self-actualizing yourself, but choosing the person every day. The other thing she said is that metaphorically, when you're laying down with the person you married after the wedding, you're not just laying down with your husband or wife, but you're laying down with their entire family. All their experiences, all the people who have shaped them, hurt them, all of those emotions and scars, habits, emotions ingrained into their psyche. You are dating and you're loving and married to all of that. And that is something that I've thought back to again and again. Little ways that I get hurt or that he gets hurt. Often it is exemplified, connected to ways you've been scarred and hurt in the past. It's not just loving and living with and supporting this person, but being aware of all the other people who have disappointed and hurt and made them feel insecure or less than. One of my best friends, she's engaged now, but we both got into new relationships around the same time. And so we were going through the phases of a relationship together. And after one of our first bad fights, she said that those first fights, having bad arguments or fights, it's one of the best things in a relationship because you learn so much about the other person when you hurt each other like that. And I'm not at all saying that fighting, intense arguing is an amazing thing in a relationship. You have to deal with those arguments and fights and find a healthy way of solving disagreements, conflicts, communicating better. But in those times when there has been chaos, when we have really hurt each other, the conversations analyzing why the person felt a certain way, that has taught me the most wisdom, learning so much about each other, things that have hurt and shaped and affected us in the past. So even in rough or really hurtful times in a relationship or long-term in a marriage, this RCIA talk from a deacon at Trevor's church, he was so intense, and he was like, there will be months or years where you do not like the person, hate them, feel like you made a huge mistake marrying them, want to leave them. And he was going through these 4 phases of a relationship and how again and again you can regret being with the person, hate it, feel awful, feel like you're gaining nothing from it. But in those moments we should be so grateful. But in those moments we have to ask, am I flourishing? Am I growing? Am I learning more about how to be Christ-like and how to love someone? I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Doesn't make it true.